So my name is Brito, and I am going to talk today about different ways to deliver comprehensible input using the same reading. So once you have a reading, how can you use that reading to deliver input multiple times? And as language teachers, we already know that repetition is key when it comes to learning a language. But Sean Lowen, in his Instructed Second Language Acquisition book, he stated that most researchers believe that multiple exposures to a word are necessary before it is learned. So in this session, I'm going to talk about how we can provide those multiple exposures to the language, again, based on the same text. And not only do we have to present the same vocabulary or the same structures over and over again, but we have to provide students with activities that are varied from reading to reading. We can't use the same text and say, like, here, read the text 3 times, one at home, one in the class, and then one with a partner. We need to provide activities for them. And today I'm going to be talking about those activities that hopefully you can take and use in your classroom. Before we move on to looking at the activities that we use, we need to make sure that the reading and the text that you're using in the classroom is comprehensible to students. Because if it is something that the students do not understand, it doesn't matter how many times they see it. If they're not comprehending the text, then they're not learning it. And so Lowen, again, talks about how comprehensible input, or CI, is that input that is slightly more advanced than a learner's current interlanguage state. And this is all based on Stephen Krashen's theory of input hypotheses, not theory, but his input hypotheses. Where is my, it's not popping up, guys. Seems like my slides have frozen. Yes, I'm sorry, okay, it doesn't matter. So Stephen Krashen's hypothesis of input talks about how input should be what he calls I+1, and the one being just slightly more advanced than what the students can comprehend. For purposes of this session, I'm going to assume that the readings and the text that you're working with in the classroom is already comprehensible to students. So that is not something I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to talk about what activities you can use to present that text over and over again, provided that it is already comprehensible to students. So the first activity I like to use in the classroom is embedded reading. Has anyone not used embedded reading before? You can just like wave at me. Okay, so embedded readings were created by Lori Clark and Michelle Whaley. And basically you take a story and then you are going to have different versions of that story. And you begin with a very basic version of the story where you begin with the phrases that you most want the students to know. And it is like the skeleton, like an outline of the story. And the students read the first version. And then you provide a second version. And the second version is the exact same story from the first one, except you add more details in between. So now they have a little bit of a longer story, but the first one is still in there. And then you provide a third version with even more details. So you just keep adding more details to the same story. And this provides great repetition because the students, the very skeleton of the story, they read 3 times. So they read it the first time, and then they read it the second time with more detail, and they read it a third time. So they get that repetition. By the end of the third version, they've already read the targeted input 3 times. Something I recommend is that you check for comprehension after each version of the story. You can't give them a handout with, okay, version 1 of the story, version 2, version 3. go read it with a partner, it is important that you pause after each version and then check for comprehension, whether it is talk to your neighbor, or maybe you have questions, simple questions written after each one that they have to answer, or as the teacher, you can just like check in with the class as a whole to make sure that they are understanding. And so embedded reading, like I said, provides the extra repetition because they see the structures over and over again, but it is also a good way to provide comprehension and to scaffold a reading, because it serves to purpose as it scaffolds. It lets students understand each time a little bit more and a little bit more. At the same time, it provides repetition. So instead of saving the questions for the end, does anyone have any questions about embedded reading? Did it make sense? Okay. Yes, go ahead, Jake.
Would you deliver multiple readings? Like, would you do all 3 parts in one class, or would you spread them out over multiple classes?
I've always done them all in the same class because I teach novice students, and so I have 6th graders and 7th graders, and so the stories are short. We don't have very long ones, so we just do it all in one class. If I were to have a reading when I used to teach high school in higher levels, then I could see how it could go into a second day, right? Especially because it's more content. So you could do one day, have several comprehension questions. Once they really understand that, then the next day have a longer one. So definitely with higher levels, I could see how you could spread it out longer. Okay. The next one is volleyball reading. And volleyball reading, I've also heard it referred to as popcorn reading. And this is, you need to use a story that the students have already read. So they've read the story already. And then for a second time that they see it, they work with a partner. And all they're doing is going back and forth, rereading the story one sentence at a time. So if Jake is my partner, I would read the first sentence, and then Jake would read the second sentence, and I would do the third and the fourth, and just going back and forth, volleyball the reading. But to add for comprehension, I would have them translate the sentence their partner read before they read their own sentence. So if I read my sentence in Spanish, and then Jake, before he reads sentence number 2, he would have to translate what I just said and then read his sentence number 2 from the reading. And then I would say, like if Jake says, el gato es rojo, and then I would say, the cat is red, el gato corre muy rápido. And then Jake would say, the cat runs very fast, and he would read his sentence. And so it is a great way to, it keeps the students engaged. It has them make sure they're comprehending because they're having to translate the text, but it's providing that input again because they are rereading the whole story. So this is like this, if they've read it on their own or they read it as a class, now they're reading it again. And so they're seeing it again and it's going back in. Are there any questions on that one? Any ideas? Have any of you used the volleyball reading or popcorn reading in a different way? No. Another way to redeliver the same input for the students to see the text again is to have them sketch a scene. And this activity comes directly, it's a snapshot of a sketch the scene from the Somos, the Comprehensible classroom. And so you take the story and then you divide it into little sections and you write 2 or 3 sentences. Here you can see 2 or 3 sentences for each sentence, and then the students have to sketch, make a sketch to show that they comprehend what it is they are reading. So the sketch is important because they're showing comprehension, but they're having to reread the story just in different sections. So instead of having the big reading, now they're reading it in little sections, and you're providing more more repetition here. Now, you can target the input, which is wonderful, right? There are always, the stories have the main structures that we really want the students to know, and you always have more detail. So when you sketch the scene, you are going to target the input. You're going to choose that vocabulary, those structures that you want the students to see again, and those are the ones you're going to write here, and maybe leave some details as well if you want. But as a teacher, you have the option of writing what you want the students to see again. And so it's just another way for them to reread the story. And now they're being engaged because they're making a sketch, and so they don't get bored. There's a lot of activities that we can do with images. So here they are sketching. Another way for them to see the writing again is to have them match an image to a description. And so this is a very simple one. This comes from a movie talk that I do with students. So I show them a video, and as the video plays, I pause the video and talk about it. And so in this case, the very first input that they hear is listening, because they hear me tell the story, and then I give them a written story that they go through and they read it on their own. And then they work on comprehension activities, but these comprehension activities also provide more input because they have an image and they have sentences that they have to read. And so it's coming back in, right? They're reading again the same sentences from the reading, and then they're matching them. You target the input again. You're going to pick the sentences that have the structures and the vocabulary that you want them to see over and over again. And something that I like to do is to paraphrase. So in this sketch the scene, I usually take sentences directly from the reading and then have them sketch directly from the reading. When I do these, a lot of times I will paraphrase so that they see the same structures and the same vocabulary, but a little bit different, rather than seeing the same sentence over and over again. And that way they can start making more connections by seeing it posted differently. Are there any questions on this one? Nope. You guys are like my students when we first started online teaching. Everyone just looking at me. No. Okay, so with this one, where you match the scene to the sentence, you can provide even more comprehensible input. You can provide more repetitions by having them put them in chronological order. Give me 1 second. Sorry, they're picking up my dog. So you can have them put the sentences in chronological order. So now they have to read them again to be able to figure out what happened first. And so it's just another repetition of the vocabulary in the sentences. And if not putting them in chronological order, you can have those sentences be answers to questions that you have on the bottom of the sheet. So you could have, for example, one of these sentences says, "Los perros corren," the dogs run. And so maybe on the bottom section, I will have questions like, for example, what did the dogs do when they went outside? And the students have to come back and read these sentences to decide which one is going to answer the question that is asked. And so this works well if you want that extra repetition for them. And then another, text and images. This is an activity that I have not done myself yet. I was speaking with the Latin teacher at our school, Beth Manca, and it's something that I want to try really soon because it sounds wonderful. It's sort of like the sketch, where you have a part of the story and then you sketch it, except here, the teacher makes the sketches. And she says the students love looking at her artwork and then making fun of it, so it keeps them engaged and interesting. And so she will sketch the story and provide, let's say, 6 pictures with space next to them. And then she has the students go back to the original story, find the sentence in the story that represents the sketch she made, and then they write the sentence from the story that she made. And so here, if she has 6 different sketches, that's 6 different times that the students are going back and skimming through the same reading, getting all that input in their brain again, trying to find the sentence that matches. And so it's just a lot of ways for students to see the reading over and over and over again in different activities and having them engaged, and at the same time checking for comprehension. And then the last activity I have, it is targeted input as well, right? Because you sketch whatever you want the students to remember. And I really like this because it's not just one sentence that they're reading, they're having to go back to the whole reading and just kind of skim all of it. The last activity I have here is called running dictation. And this one is a little bit more complicated to explain. So has anyone not done a running dictation? You have not done the running dictation? Okay. So for the running dictation, you again target the input. So you just pick some sentences. I like to pick 6 sentences. That seems to be the magic number. You get 6 sentences from the text. You can paraphrase the story if you want. And you put each sentence on a strip of paper. And then those strips of paper, you are going to place them in the hallway. So you go out to the hallway and you tape them up to the wall. And then students are going to work in pairs. And the objective is for them to transfer the information from the strip in the hallway onto their paper in the classroom. And you have one student in the classroom with a pen and pencil, and their job is to write the sentences. Now, the sentences, they see them because the partner has to go out into the hallway, read the sentence in the hallway. Let's say the sentence in the hallway says, the dog runs fast every weekend. And so partner A goes out into the hallway, reads the sentence, the dog runs fast every weekend, and has to remember that sentence. And they come back into the classroom and they tell the sentence to their partner and they say, the dog runs. As the partner is hearing, they are writing the sentence. The students do not remember the sentence in one go. So then partner A go, the dog runs, and they're like, oh, I can't remember the rest of it. And they run back to the hallway and they reread the sentence and they're like, runs fast every weekend, runs fast every weekend, runs fast every weekend. And they come back and then they say the sentence to their partner, and they, as many times as that person needs to go back and forth to make sure that their partner writes the sentence. And so it's great because one partner is reading the sentence and saying it and they're speaking, and the other partner is listening to what the student says, and they are writing it. So it involves everything in here. And so they go back and forth until they get the sentences transferred, and they switch. So one person does 3 sentences, and then they switch roles, and the other person runs back and forth. And so with this, going back and forth and transferring the information afterwards, I have the students check the sentences that they wrote. So I will put the sentences on the overhead, and the sentences that they wrote, not the ones they went back and forth, but the ones they wrote, then underneath it, they have to write the sentence from the board. And so they already read it in the hallway. Now they are reading it off the overhead to copy it. And I have them circle the errors. I tell them I'm not taking any points off, it's nothing, but you need to notice this is focus on form, where they can notice where they are making errors, where maybe they misspelled a word or they missed a word. And they just circle their errors. And then you can stop there. But if you want that to provide another repetition, you can have them with a partner put the events in chronological order. So now they've read it outside. They've heard their partner say it. They read it off the overhead when they are correcting. And then they have to read them again to put them in chronological order. So this activity can provide comprehensible input. Reading comprehensible input 3 times, plus them listening to their partner would be even a 4th time. This activity, I did not know who to credit for it because I've seen it in many blogs. I know Tina Harganen talks about it. Somos has it. But I took a break from teaching in 2011, and in the early 2000s, I was already using this activity that I had picked up from a conference somewhere. So it's been around for a long time. I don't know where it originated, but it is really a good one. And then I have one more slide, and I know it's like 9:58.
We are just about out of time. Maybe I can give you one more minute to finish up.
Okay, I have just one more minute.
Sounds good.
Maybe even less. The next one, just no questions anymore, but the next one is not a comprehensible input delivery, but it is something that a few years ago I heard Tina Harganen mention, and it is how to lower the effective filter with readings. On the top here, you have a text, and when you have it in like small font and all close together, a lot of times students see it and they become overwhelmed or they are intimidated by reading it. So just by providing the larger font, usually 14:16, and either double spacing or putting 1.5 spaces in between, you have this, and it automatically lowers the effective filter, and students feel like it's not so overwhelming. They can sit down, kind of like a kid's book. They read it, it's large font, it's spaced, and so I think it helps my students. And that is it. I am finished. So that is my information, and at the end, my references. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mary. Does anybody have any questions?
Mari, just one question. Yes. Do you make the materials for embedded stories, or can you like buy them somewhere, or because it looks like kind of a lot of work to add layers?
It is a lot of work. You can definitely buy some, I'm assuming. I usually make mine, but there is, so Laurie Clark, and I have her here in the reference, she has a embeddedreading.com, and so she's the one that originated this, and I'm sure she has stories in there. And some places will already use, like some curriculums will have some of them.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.